So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Woke and Rested, Coping in Today's Climate. My name is Danette Brown, and I'm a licensed therapist, as well as the creator of Young Black Nexus, an organization that is designed to promote mental health and wellness in the Black community in the Metro Detroit area. And I'm so excited to have you all on board. Thank you all for tuning in, and special thanks to our panel that we have here today. We have some dynamic speakers and presenters here, and I'm so excited to hear from them and hear them share about their experiences in the mental health and wellness field. How today will work is I'll give a brief introduction of each of our panelists, and then I'll have them speak about their experiences, the work that they're doing and all of that, because I just cannot do them justice. Their resumes are impeccable. They're doing a lot of work in the mental health field and as well as wellness. So we'll get started shortly. We're just waiting on a few more people to join so we don't have to keep repeating and things of that nature. Okay. 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 And for those of you all that are tuning in, we'll leave some time at the end for you all to ask questions, and you can do that in one or two ways. So first, you can comment on our live video and we'll do our best to answer your questions. And then if you feel more comfortable, you can send us a private message and we'll do our best as well to get to those questions. We'll leave some time at the end for you all to ask questions to our panel. And then if you want to connect with any of the therapists or our wellness coach that's here with us today, we'll make sure we link you with them as well and provide their information. Okay. So just a disclaimer, the information shared today is from our own personal experiences and our own expertise. This does not supersede any medical advice provided by your primary care physicians, your doctors, your therapists, and things of that nature. So with that being said, just take it with a grain of salt. We'll do our best to share like our own perspectives in this field, but again, this is in no way supersedes your doctor's advice and treatment plans and things of that nature. Okay. All right. And then if any of you are taking clients, please feel free to let me know because I really would like to connect people with you all if they ask, and I'll make sure I send out your business pages and business contact information as well. All right. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and get started. As I said, my name is Danette Brown. I'm a licensed therapist as well as creator of Young Black Nexus. And we have some awesome people today on our panel here to talk about mental health and wellness in the Black community. First, I would like to introduce Dr. Gomez. I had the opportunity to hear her speak at Motor City Singer Space, and she did a wonderful job and presented in a TED Talk fashion about cultural betrayal and trauma. She has an extensive resume focused on mental health in the Black community and other cultures as well. She is an assistant professor, correct, at Wayne State University. And like she's doing so much research, many articles, and she is amazing. I can't wait to hear from her. You're going to be blown away by her expertise and her skill set. And then we have Mrs. Alicia Jackson, a licensed therapist who works for Wentworth and Associates. I had the opportunity to hear her speak at Motor City Singer Space as well. Shout out to Ben Will for putting that event together, because had I not, I wouldn't have gotten the opportunity perhaps to hear them speak. And when I heard them both, I was just like, I need to partner with them. I need to work with them. So I am so excited to have her as well. And then we have Mrs. Lisa A. Smith. She is a certified plant-based nutritionist, as well as the owner and founder of Professionally Fit in the Black Health Academy, correct? And I had the opportunity to like kind of meet her in passing with my mom, who also does plant-based food. She's owner of Sisters on the Road Catering Company, and my mom has partnered with her. So I was so excited to have her on board to share her expertise as well in the area of wellness and promoting physical health in the Black community and beyond. And then we have Michelle Madison. She is so awesome. She went to Cass Tech, stand up. Shout out to Cass, best school in Detroit, no comment. But I had the opportunity to hear her speak in various capacities this summer. She's done a ton of webinars, she's done panel discussions, she's provided many resources for allyship for those who are not Black, who are not people of color, to be allies. She has a lot to offer. She is a yoga instructor as well as a recent graduate from the University of Michigan. She has her license in social work now. And then last but certainly not least, we have Pastor Clifford Clark. He is the teaching pastor at Conquerors Church in Roseville, and he's also the owner of Transparent Counseling, Transparent Professional Counseling, right? And I had the opportunity to hear him speak at a Christian-based dating event. It was talking about branding yourself and just being a Christian in today's time. And when I heard him speak as well, I was like, I need to partner with him. He has some key insights talking about mental health and pairing that with faith-based introductions and faith-based practices and things of that nature. So I was just like, I need to partner with him. So I'm so glad to have each and every one of you on board today. And without further ado, we will get started. And again, for those who are just tuning in, please be sure to leave your comments with questions and things of that nature below on the live video. And then if you feel more comfortable, you can send us a message and we'll do our best to get to those questions as well. And again, take it with a grain of salt, because what we offer today does not supersede your medical advice from your doctors as well as your therapist, okay? All right, so getting us started, we'll start with you, Dr. Gomez. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do and your work, your research, and things of that nature?
Sure. So first, honored to be with all the other panelists. So as a panelist, it's the funnest thing because you get to like learn from other people on the panel. So I'm excited to hear others who aren't me talk and learn some things too. So briefly, I am a trauma psychologist. I got my PhD in clinical psychology in 2017, and I've been at Wayne State for the past 3 years, and I'm a professor, as Jeanette mentioned. So primarily, I'm lots of different hats, but I'm a researcher. And so I developed cultural betrayal trauma theory as a way to understand how the context of inequality and oppression and discrimination impacts people who are marginalized, particularly Black people, and their impact of violence. And so the idea is that because of, for Black people, like this anti-Black racism thing, some Black people develop this, I call intercultural trust, like solidarity with each other. I am because we are, and all of that. So when there's within group violence, it violates that trust. So it's a cultural betrayal. And so then within group violence, or like Black on Black crime, how it was known in the 90s when I was coming up, then are cultural betrayal traumas. So stuff like physical violence, being beaten up, sexual violence, sexual assault, rape, sexual harassment, psychological violence, being put down, sex trafficking, the whole gamut. So when it's someone else who's also Black, then it has this cultural betrayal in it. And so I propose with the theory that people who've experienced these cultural betrayal traumas that are more likely to have things like PTSD, depression, anxiety, stuff that as a trauma researcher we see all the time in the literature. And then stuff that we don't typically study, things like internalized prejudice. And so like if this is what being Black is, like I don't want any part of it. And like de-identification then with the Black community, which would be a huge cost and one that we don't typically think about when we think about trauma. So that's the theory, cultural betrayal trauma theory. And then I have research studies about this, kind of documenting this harm that's been done. A great article, if I do say so myself, is I published in The Conversation. It's called The Unique Harm of Sexual Abuse in the Black Community. And it's a short article that kind of gives you the quick and dirty version of this. But my hope with it, so everyone always asks me like how I can do this work, like isn't it super depressing? And I think the violence is happening anyhow. Whether we're attuning to it or not, or denying it or not. And if we understand what's going on, then it can lead to hope and healing and love and connection and solidarity and all these wonderful things. And so I actually find it really hopeful to do this work. And I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you. It's definitely needed research, and I'm so glad that you shared that. And we'll try to provide a link to your research as well at the end. Okay. All right. And then Alicia, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, I'm Alicia Jackson, a licensed professional counselor. I've been in the field for about 12 years. Makes me feel old when I say that, but about 12 years. A bulk of my experience has been in the community mental health arena, which I find to be a great ground and breeding ground for doing real meaningful work and getting great access to working with our people. And so I worked with adults and also children and family. I worked with one of the premier children agencies in Detroit, the Children's Center. And there I worked and provided actually supervision over home-based services, which is very high acuity cases. So children who are in risk and in and out of hospitalization and high suicidality. So I worked there and gained really great, again, training. And I've been trained in dialectical behavioral therapy, which is a training, a type of therapy I still use in my private practice working now, which has been very, very helpful in doing the work that's meaningful for what we're facing with today. Even once this whole quarantine happened, felt the need to do a quarantine support group for the first few months that this occurred online, which was very beneficial for even myself as running the group. It was really great to see us as the people come together and provide that support and provide that resource. So it's been amazing to be a vessel and to be a help this time for sure.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing the work that you do. And I had the wonderful opportunity to hear you speak and share about your experiences as a therapist and being in the mental health field. So I appreciate you for being here today. All right, next we'll go with Lisa. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do, your organizations, as well as, if you feel comfortable, your story, because I think it's amazing as far as like your journey to wellness and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, very fascinated by the work that Dr. Gomez and Alicia is doing. I love the idea of the cultural behavioral trauma, and I love what has grown out of quarantine and COVID, such as the quarantine support group. Very dope, Alicia. But I'm Lisa A. Smith. I am a serial entrepreneur. I am the founder of Professionally Fit, as well as the Black Health Academy, and the executive director of the Plant-Based Nutrition Support Group. I'm also the author of The Plant-Based Foodie and the creator of a course called Farm to Table, farm spelled PHARM. And so full-time, I slang plants, y'all. All I did was talk about the power of the plant and how what we put in our bodies has a massive impact, just not on us physically, but emotionally and mentally as well. And so when I started the Black Health Academy in 2017, the mission was to take Black health history and learn from it, how people of color have been used historically in this country for the advancement of medicine and technology against our will. And so in us being used against our will for the advancement of medicine, we have developed what is called iatrophobia. It's essentially fear of the white coat, and how that has led to the breakdown of our health, how it has led to a shorter life expectancy. And then when we bring in post-traumatic slavery disorder and all of those things, we are essentially getting the short end of the stick, as we're experiencing right now with disproportionate deaths due to COVID, right? So I teach individuals how to use whole food plant-based nutrition to heal chronic disease, to prevent chronic disease, to reverse mental and emotional instability, because prescribed drugs are one thing, right? But we know the adverse effects of them. We know the long-term effects of them. And just starting with something as basic as drinking water can make a huge difference in mental health. And so I teach the health side of things, how emotional intelligence, behavior change science, and I absolutely love it. A little bit about me really, really quickly is I started my own personal health and wellness journey in 2012, hired my first personal trainer. I was 65 pounds heavier than what I am today. And I began on a journey to wellness about 10 months after hiring my first personal trainer, and after her helping me lose about 30 pounds, I moved to Rome. And then I got back from Rome, and then about 7 months later, I moved to China. And so I lived on 2 different continents back to back. And the biggest difference I saw living on those 2 continents was the way they consumed food. And so when I got back to the US, I completely ditched a career in social work, dove headfirst into health, and started my first company in 2015, second in 2017. And it's been all about using food as medicine, healing individuals from the inside out, and using what Earth has provided to help advance our life expectancy and slow down, unfortunately, the disproportionate deaths in our community. And so I absolutely love my work. Happy to be here with y'all today, and we're gonna slay these plants and talk about it, y'all.
Awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate the work that you're doing. Your journey has inspired me as well. I'm not there yet, but I'm excited to continue to grow and learn from you as well.
Thank you.
And then Michelle, can you introduce yourself and talk about the work that you're doing, and you being on the council for Governor Whitmer's Physical Health and Wellness Council as well?
Yeah, of course. So hi, everyone. I am so excited to be on this panel. Just listening to the work of everyone that we're kind of like rubbing elbows with right now is just amazing. So I'm honored to be here. So I'll start with my profession as a yoga instructor. I became a yoga instructor in 2014, have been practicing probably since 2011, 2012, and consistently. But I focus as a yoga instructor and a meditation instructor on how to help people reduce their emotional reactivity. So teaching them how to experience sensations, observe them, create a space between the sensation and how they decide to react. Specifically focusing on more so like teenagers recently, so that they can understand the ability and the power of having the choice of feeling a sensation, feeling an emotion, and not allowing it to overtake every single thing that they do. As a social worker, I've more so stepped into the leadership perspective of things, really wanting to talk to people about stress and how it mitigates everything that happens in their life. I'm a mom of 3 young boys that I just love to always talk about in my works as well. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thank you.
It's short.
Honestly, you wear many hats, and I appreciate you for taking the time out to join us today. Okay. And then lastly, Pastor Clark, can you share a bit about the work that you're doing in the mental health field, as well as your work as a pastor?
Absolutely. First and foremost, to my predecessors here, you ladies left some pretty big shoes to fill. I am certain I will not be able to fill those shoes. So kudos to you guys and the work that you're doing. Salute to you. It is absolutely commendable, much needed. Our people need it more now than ever. And so I'm encouraged to see the diversity and how strategic God is in employing and raising up different passions in each of you respectively to help meet the comprehensive needs of people. So this is encouraging stuff. Happy to be a part. Danette, thanks for putting this together. Clifford Clark, I am, as you mentioned, the teaching pastor over at Conquerors Church in Roseville, Michigan. I also am a licensed psychotherapist, specializing in marriage, relationship, sexual addiction, and men's issues. I do some work with trauma, mood disorders in general, some neurological work as well, and even some personality disorders, narcissism, histrionic, some borderline stuff. I do a little bit of that work, but people by and large seek me out for those aforementioned specialties. The sexual addiction component is a kind of a supplemental initiative to help inform the competency in the work that I do with my couples. So I see a lot of couples. That's kind of primarily my client base, and then the surge of with the exposure to pornography and how sex has just become so the society has become so hypersexualized. Then we're seeing a lot more of sexual addiction cases, and it's making their ways into marriages, and quite frankly, destroying them. So I do that work as a complement to support the focus in marriages. I counsel conventionally from a psycho-Christian intersection, which essentially just means that when I counsel and preach and teach from that intersection, which essentially means that when I preach or when I teach in church, I am looking at the scriptures not only through a theological lens, but also through a psychological lens. When I read the scriptures, psychology just jumps off the page. There are so many of the evidence-based modalities that we use as clinicians that are, in my opinion, all precedented in scripture. In my opinion, psychology didn't coin any of it. It's all, God's stamp is on all of it, and it's all in the scriptures, and I use it regularly in my in my practice as a minister. And then, of course, in the clinical sector, integrating the scripture into a lot of my clients' session who are faith-based and who elect to have a biblical Christian integrative approach in the therapy session dynamic. Yep, that's a little bit about me. I have two offices, one in Inkster and one in Southgate. So I'm practicing out of two locations. What else? I think that's a little bit, I think that's enough, actually. I could go on, but I should say this. What spawned my work to be informed and kind of lay out the way that it does is I grew up in the church, started preaching young at 17, and went on. My undergraduate work was in theology and Christian ministries, started pastoring at a young age as well. And I found out a big problem that we had in the church. Many pastors, we were doing a lot of counseling. We were doing a whole lot of counseling. Very few of us, if any at all, knew what the heck we were doing. We were not counseling. We were doing much more along the lines of what you would call spiritual formation than it was actually, clinical counseling. So for that reason, I endeavored to earn a clinical degree at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, go Blue. Hey, we got a few Wolverines in the house. To be a Master of Social Work with a concentration in interpersonal practice, mental health, to be ambidextrous in my approach in treating both the spiritual climate as well as the psychological component to my clients. So, yep, that's a little about me.
Thank you. I think you sold yourself a little short there. Your resume is amazing as well. And I love how you talk about the intersection between mental health and our faith, because faith is important, as you know, to the Black community. And I love that you talk about and share like these two can go hand in hand. They don't have to be two separate entities. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So just before we dive into the questions, just a reminder for you all that are just tuning in. What we'll do is we have some questions that we'll ask our panel, and then at the end, we'll leave some time for you all to ask questions. So feel free to comment below in the live video. And then if you feel more comfortable, you can also send us a message, and we won't share your name or anything like that. And we'll just ask it to the panel as well. And again, as a disclaimer, none of what is said supersedes your primary care physician or any other doctors or your therapist information that they provide to you. We are just sharing things from our perspective and expertise. Okay. So just to get us started, and we'll start with you, Alicia. Can you talk a little bit about what are some common mental health and overall health concerns that you've seen in the Black community and in the work that you do?
I think really there's a step before that that takes place. I think what happens is there is a lot of undiagnosed mental illness in our community, and so the huge pieces of treatment that it's the first forefront is like psychoeducation of what mental illness looks like for us. A lot of what I see is untreated and unresolved trauma, which goes a lot to what the work that Dr. Gomez is doing, because a lot of the things that we are inheriting are things that have been endured through and passed down through slavery, generational trauma, and then we have been taught that this is just how we are. This is the Jacksons. This is what we do. This is just what the Johnsons do. And so we have to do a lot of psychoeducation about what generational trauma and undiagnosed trauma looks like, and teaching and reteaching how we can relate to each other in a healthy way. And so a lot of the byproduct of that undiagnosed trauma is, of course, you see it in anxiety, you see it in maladaptive behaviors and how we cope, and substance use. So it is definitely the gamut kind of comes to us, and what we see a lot when people enter into our office and come seeking help is really how do we relate? How do we have healthy relationships and build healthy attachments, and know what that looks like because of, despite what we've experienced in this country. Sure.
Yeah, I would add, Alicia, like I'm a trauma psychologist, but even with that, it's trauma. Like trauma comes everything else, and then for Black people, you have trauma and violence, and then racism, and then all of the things within the Black community, the other isms of sexism and homophobia, and kind of everything else. Dr. Judith Herman talks about the disguised presentation of trauma, which is very rarely, it happens, but rarely do people come in and say, I've been abused and so I want help with that. They come in and say, I can't keep a relationship, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I'm not eating, or I'm overeating, I'm cutting, I'm suicidal. And so then it's up to the therapist to kind of help weed through and get to the kernel, which a lot of times is this like trauma isms, combo.
Definitely peeling back those layers to get to the root issue and what's really going on. And then Lisa, do you have anything to share from your perspective as far as like what you see in the work that you do?
Yeah, I'll say, piggybacking off of what Dr. Gomez said is interesting. I actually was one of those people who went into my therapist's office and said, my father abandoned me when I was a young child, and I'm for sure I'm overcompensating with this I'm not enough syndrome. And my overcompensation was with achievement. And so on paper, my resume looks amazing, but nobody knows I was doing it because I never felt like I was enough for my father to love me, right? And so here I am with this plethora of degrees, certifications, businesses that I've started, doing all these things, but it was always trying to chase this feeling of wanting to be accepted and wanting to be loved. And it was just really abandonment that planted that seed, right? And so when I hired my therapist a couple years ago, and as we began to work through and unwind that trauma and the root cause of it, that was a huge, huge stepping stone in me being able to excel in every other area of my life, as I was able to recognize my triggers. I was able to recognize when that fear of abandonment was showing up. right? And how that manifested in my relationships with others. And so, you know, you guys are right. It's not every day that someone does do that. We usually identify the results of that trauma. But when you're able to get to the root of it, and when we are able to peel the mask off what it means to be in a therapeutic setting and, you know, drop down those walls and willing to be vulnerable, it is powerful.
Thank you for that transparency.
Yeah.
And Michelle, is there anything that you would like to add?
Yeah, I'd like to build on that. I think that a lot of the work that I try to do is use simple language so that people who have not at that point in their life gone to attain, you know, a secondary education or higher degree to understand like the topics of what we're talking about. I want to actually approach it in the way that I want to answer the question as to how we use language in our culture. I think in my experience, when I've gone and like sat in different rooms and I've had to code switch and I've had to use expensive language to understand like what's happening in the environment. And when I go back to like Upward Bound, where I was once a participant as a at-risk youth, I can't use that same language with my at-risk youth for them to understand what's affecting them. So I think that our use of language, either from, you know, I'll say maybe at a really early age to that transitional age period from 14 to 19, that information is not really solidified in a healthy way. So I'll keep it there, but I want to say like maybe the use of simple language would help that component.
Definitely. That's something I had to work towards, and doing the work that I do, as well as making sure like I say things in a way that people understand. Whereas like I can say certain things to a colleague, I can't use that same language with a client. So being mindful of that and keeping that in mind, and making sure like I'm staying relevant and current on what's at hand, what's going on in the world, so I can make sure that I am providing the necessary support for each of my clients as well. So I think that's so important that you mentioned that language, and code switching is so powerful. I had to check myself on my own code switching, because I noticed I do it. I didn't think I did, you know, because I have a pretty mellow voice, you know, and it's only so much that I can say, you know. But I noticed like, oh, I do this, you know, I didn't know I did it, but now I know.
Absolutely. And then you come to a point where you like rub up against that friction that it builds by having to code switch so much. And then, you know, I think at a certain point, you have to come to a point where you face that wall and you say, look, this is who I am. I can't really keep code switching because that's not good for my mental health. That's not good for my being. If I can't be myself in my workspace, in the same space that I'm at, in all these other different environments, like there's a problem, not with me, but with the structures. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, coming back a little bit before with the psychoeducation, like as a researcher, when I was in training to be a therapist, there's misunderstandings of what research is and then what the results of it mean. And so for me, like I mentioned, we see all the time that exposure to violence is associated with all of everything bad. Mental health, physical health, behavioral health, everything bad. What that does when I tell that to clients is it can have an effect of them making them not feel crazy. Of like, oh, so like me and my cousin were sexually abused by my father, her uncle, we both had substance use problems. I'm not insane, and neither is she. You know, like this is a thing that people know about, and that can be really, really important. I think the danger and what I have to be conscious of is that research is not like a crystal ball. It's not, if you are sexually abused, you will have substance use problems. Nowhere does it say that. It just says there's an association, which means that with therapy, with different forms of healing, with faith, with all these different things, you can interrupt that link for yourself and your own life. And so there is a link, and so that's important to share, but also to not share that like your life is going to suck because you've experienced these things, so good luck to you. That's not true either.
I think it's important that you mentioned that. It's like, yeah, we have these experiences and these traumas, but it doesn't have to define us, and we can grow from it and we can heal from it as well. And there is help out there to do so.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Pastor Clark, is there anything else that you would like to add to what was said so far?
You know what, I've been motivated by everybody's comments, and I'm thinking about going 6 different directions. So the problem with me is I will go those 6 different directions if no one stops me. So what I need is, how about you? Could you repeat the question so I can confine my response?
Gotcha. So the original question was, what are some common mental health and overall health concerns in the Black community? And then we took it a step back and talked about like the psychoeducation piece that needs to happen and the conversations that needs to happen beforehand and get into the root of things going on before we even can begin to address mental health concerns and
Yeah.
overall.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to, this is kind of a complement to what Dr. Gomez was speaking to, and that is essentially normalizing, normalizing some of the experiences, the symptoms that the African American community experiences, normalizing trauma. A part of what I've seen in almost unanimously in all of my trauma victims and clients is that the shame is so strong that it silences them, and it's a ubiquitous concept because it doesn't matter what the trauma is. It could be a rape, a sexual abuse. It could be seeing a parent die, or it could be domestic violence. Whatever the case is, the shame is so overwhelming that it silences the victim. And so I think it's important to normalize that this is something that happens. It's happening to more people than you think. And because it's happening to more people than you think, you are not alone, and you can have the voice to speak up about it. When people have the ability when they develop the awareness that they have the ability to speak up about it, then it immediately breaks the chains of bondage in trauma. It helps them break through. And now, instead of simply a victim, it helps them become an analyst of it, kind of their own trauma, taking a bird's eye view to unpack it, to understand it, to research it, and then to decide competently and intentionally what they want to do with it. What they want to, it takes them from being under the rubble to being on top of it and dictating their narrative beyond what they can't control. So I think it's very important it starts at normalizing it, just helping people understanding that this is normal. We all go through things. I know social media makes us look perfect. I know our hairstyles and our haircuts and our lace front beards that men are getting now, and all kind of foolishness like that is going on. It's wild out here. All this is going on, and we look good, but the truth is we're not perfect. We're not perfect. We are broken. We're flawed. We're wounded, and we have an opportunity to grow if we would just be honest with ourselves. And it starts by normalizing it to help people become comfortable with being honest with themselves.
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely agree. You can't heal what you cannot feel. And if you don't name it and like start to like unpack it and uncover it, then it will still be there and you'll suffer in that shame and that silence when there are other people who will have experienced those things. And it's okay not to be okay. And I think more conversations are being had about that whole idea that it's okay not to be okay. You don't have to have it all together. You don't have to have all the answers and things of that nature.
Absolutely.
All right. Before we move on, any additional comments that you all would like to make about our last question?
Lace front beards are traumatic.
No question about it. No question. There's no question about that.
I just like to say that's part of a problem within the culture. Okay. Sorry, Danette. Carry on. I apologize.
No need to apologize.
And for the record, this is not a lace front. This is.
I wasn't gonna ask. Okay. Sorry. Go.
Before we move on to our next questions, I just want to reiterate for those of you leaving comments and questions, we'll make sure we take some time at the end to answer some of your questions. We'll do our best to ask the panelists the questions that you've provided, but we may not get to them. I apologize. the panelists have a lot to say and a lot to offer. So we are just going with the flow, and I'll make sure, like I said, to get to as many questions as we can. And you can leave it in the comments, or you can send us a message, and we'll try our best to get to them. Okay. And then our next question, and I'll pose this to Michelle. I know you've talked a lot about social unrest and things of that nature. So I'll start with you with this question, and then we'll move forward. And again, you all can chime in. I want you to talk about how, in your experience, how do you think COVID-19, police brutality, social unrest, and things of that nature have impacted the mental health of our community, as well as overall health? Like, what are you seeing in your work, in your experience, social media, and things of that nature?
You know, I see a lot, but I think that the way I want to talk about it is more a form of a secondary trauma. When you are able to witness someone brutally murdered by a structure of power, right? That has a lot of residual effects on them, not just the body, but the mind, the concept of fear and wondering, especially within our community, like, are we going to be next? Are our children going to go out into the street and be assumed to be something that they're not? Are we going to be given that same grace? So I would say that that's a lot of what I see now, is just this processing of, what will it be, me, or will it be someone that I love? I know that I always say that as a mother of 3 Black sons, my stomach is always in a knot. Like, my children are really, really small. Like, they're 4, 3, and 10 months. But I don't prepare anything in my life for the moment right now. I always prepare for the future. So when I'm trying to like focus on my children, I'm focusing on, well, what is their future going to look like? And I'm sure that there are other mothers in the community that feel the exact same way. What is it going to look like when my children grow, or when my nieces and nephews grow and they're not given that same grace as other races and other cultures in the community? But I would say, like, in the midst of COVID, in the midst of police brutality, and a lot of the changes and the shifts that we're seeing in the world right now, I want to say that there's like some kind of mix of hope in between all of the change that's occurring, but a real serious onset of analyzing the secondary trauma and this grief. Like, you know, the COVID-19 pandemic took away a lot of our physical normalcies, right? So if we lost a family member, we're communal folks. So we would go over, the person's house, cook a whole meal, keep them company, clean their space, do what we need to do to like make them feel comfortable. And then in the midst of COVID, that was taken away from us. So we had to get creative with, now utilizing Zoom to check on our people, or using FaceTime more, or calling more, or finding creative ways to send something over there for a mist of comfort in that moment of like true grief. And then there's another term in like the body of grief information about complicated grief. A lot of what we see right now is complicated grief, not just with COVID, but also with police brutality, and with how we as people are trying to change the structures. When they say defund the police, when they say, Black Lives Matter, I think a lot of the issues that we're seeing when people are saying that is that the lack of information of what it means and what we're actually asking for. We're not asking for police officers to just go away. We're asking for them to stop killing us. We're not saying that only Black lives matter and that's the only life on this planet that should matter. We're saying that, hey, we want to be on that same level of grace, of opportunity, of access, of, even if it's something that we need to be held accountable for, like, hold me accountable the same way you would hold a white woman accountable. Hold me accountable the same way that you would hold a person of a different racial ethnic minority accountable. Like, that's what we're trying to talk about here. And this process of, at the same time, this complicated grief, the secondary trauma, and trying to search our way through that and analyze what's changing, there's a mist of hope there. So it's kind of a bowl of everything that we're trying to process at the same time.
And I think I would add, completely agree with everything that Michelle just said, and add a lot of what I'm seeing in myself and others is, like, if you're a good Black person, then you are fighting the good fight constantly. And so what I've been battling with is that you can take a break, you can take a mental health day, you can take a mental health minute, you can have the whole day, take 15 minutes, take a half hour. It felt to me when COVID first hit in those first few months that the world was falling. And then the anti-Black violence came much more public, and then the rebellions, and then it was like, oh, like this double pandemic happening at the same time, and feeling like you don't get to take a break. Again, if you're a good Black person, if you're one who doesn't care, then you can take a break all you want, as opposed to like if you take a break, the world will still be the state that it is in. It's not going to get any worse for that half hour while you're taking a break. And that I think maybe themes that I'm hearing or pulling from what everyone's saying from the last question and this one, of putting the responsibility where it belongs. Like we can for sure fight the power and all of those things. We're also like not responsible for the racist police system. And our Black feminist Audre Lorde talked about, self-care is self-preservation, and that's political warfare. And if we are fighting for freedom and equality and peace and joy and all these things, we can find those places within ourselves and for our families and our loved ones, even as the world is crumbling down. Like we don't have to wait to have those times until everything is better. So otherwise, what are we fighting for if we're just sacrificing ourselves wholly? So I think like with mental health, particularly kind of letting I don't want to say it, the pressure off a little bit. But I'm still for the cause and for Black people if I like go take a nap, because right now social media is too much.
A lot of what I'm seeing is where we were in a situation where COVID was hitting our community so heavy. Then this just, vivid picture of George Floyd. I think, he was kind of like our Rosa Parks moment, where this man was handcuffed and on the ground and with an, officer's knee on his neck. It was just another visual of we are being attacked by a virus, a disease, and now our humanness is still being attacked. Like Michelle said, by a system, a governed system that that's licensed to kill us without asking any questions, and it attacked Blackness once again. And it's like, when do we get a chance to rest? It's even in conversations of, like Dr. Gomez saying, if you're a good Black person and you are attached to people who are wanting to, now they're like, okay, maybe I need to do some self-inventory. And there's been a lot of wonderful conversations about that. And at the same time, we're still kind of held responsible to carry the mantle and have these conversations. And they are fatiguing. You'll see people just say, here, read this book, watch this documentary, go do your research. Because at this point, I'm still grieving the people we've lost, this huge attack on our humanness, and how it's still, even though it's very obvious that this is a reality, it's still being questioned, which is like laughable and shocking and sad all at the same time. And then I still have to explain why this is an issue. So I think that's also where I just see just a lot of fatigue and how has been pulling on our emotional capacity to, like, how else can we're dealing with the grief, we're dealing with the social injustice, we're dealing with our own issues that we're dealing with in our home, being quarantined with our loved ones, and all of that comes with that. So it's just like, where do we get a chance, a moment to rest? When do we get a chance to just be, as we're always under attack or having to explain, and we deserve a moment to be human and be at peace.
Yeah, it's like, when do we grieve? Like, be the good Black person, we have to be woke, right, to stay relevant and be on top of what's going on. But it's like, it gets to a point where it's like, when is enough enough? I know for me, with everything was going on, like Michelle talked about, that complicated grief. Like, I lost multiple loved ones, and then I was still in my role as a therapist, and then being in my role at my church, and then being in like all these roles and hats that I wear. And then people were like, oh, what do you think about this? And can you speak to this? And I'm just like, I need to take a break. Like, I can't, like, friends would send articles and things of that nature. And I would just be like, I don't want to watch that. I don't want to read that. I'm so sorry, but I need to take care of my mental health as well. And I don't have the capacity to talk about this. Like, I'm not the black expert on blackness and things of that nature. I don't want to be the only black expert or black expert, how it's like shortened, And I need that time to be me, like just like take the hats off and just rest in it. And that's why I wanted to name this Woke and Rested. Like, how can we be both? Like that idea of being both, and like I can be woke, but I can also say, okay, enough is enough. Like, I don't have the capacity to talk about this. I don't have the capacity to like explain to you why my life matters or my people's lives matter and things of that nature.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say, Danette, I feel like this question was the title track of the conversation. But from my purview, what I've seen in my students and my clients from a health standpoint is how the stress has really taken a toll on them physically and mentally. We know with us being right in the midst of a pandemic, and with the pandemic targeting some of the most vulnerable populations of our society, those of us with pre-existing conditions, and we know pre-existing conditions being disproportionately running rampant through the Black community. Stress is an immunosuppressant. Okay, so stress literally compromises your immune system, and our immune system is all. This is probably one of the very few talks I've had in the last few months that's been about mental health. Everyone wants me to come on and talk about immunity, and one of the very first things I have to talk about is like, look, guys, we have to find a way to get under, through, in between, and over this stress, because it's literally shutting down our immune system, disabling our body's ability to create the antibodies needed to fight not only COVID-19, but all of the anti-racism, injustice things that's going on right now. And so the stress part is really, really huge. And because of many individuals in our community were already suffering from things such as hypertension, high cholesterol, obesity, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune, cancer, then you bring a pandemic into it, and then you bring, the continued mass killing of us into it. It's been overwhelming. And really, our households have, even before 2020, pretty much been a microcosm of society as a whole, meaning, we've always been wearing these multitude of hats. We've always been juggling all of these different stressors, but now it just seems to be compounded because we're going through it collectively, right? But for most of us, our household has already been a microcosm of what's happening already. And so we don't have the privilege of white women's tears. And so we've always only solely been responsible for our own healing and giving. We only could get permission for respite and restoration from ourselves, because the world doesn't give it to us, right? Black women are just not allowed to grieve. We're just not allowed to take a time off. And so we've adopted a lot of those ideologies, and we feel guilt when we decide to, right? And so it's so many things are compounded here. But from a physical health standpoint, I just want to remind our listeners that stress is immunosuppressing, guys. And so if we don't take the time to get rested and restore, we are literally making ourselves more vulnerable to this disease and all others, regardless of how many masks you wear and how much hand sanitizer you use.
I'd like to build on what Lisa just mentioned. So when we talk about stress, right, like stress, and I'm speaking like with my yoga instructor hat on, stress isn't always bad, right? Stress teaches us a body of information, right? So it's too much stress that becomes bad. And when we have too much stress and that becomes tension in the body, and that tension in the body has nowhere to go, that tension becomes pain. So like in a lot of my yoga classes, a lot of my clients come to me with back aches. Like that's probably like the number one thing that we hear. It's because we hold a lot of like pressure and tension in our back, and we don't circulate it in a way that it like we can use it. So when we're talking about this idea and this body of information of stress, not trying to live a life of stress-free, like that's unrealistic. It's about how we use that stress and how we internally set our own boundaries to say that this stress I can deal with, but here's my threshold. And then after my threshold, I need to start using this tool, that tool, this tool, breathing tools, going to talk to my therapist, not turning on the news, whatever that might be. after I reach my threshold, now I need to start implementing things so that this stress does not overtake my body and then become exactly what Lisa just mentioned.
Thank you for that clarification, Michelle. Definitely chronic stress and not acute. Absolutely.
And to jump on what you mentioned there, Michelle, in terms of getting practical on how to manage that stress, just one of the things that immediately comes to mind, Alicia, I also work with DBT and using it as an integrative approach along with CBT, Gestalt, a lot of other models. But radical acceptance, if you don't know what it is, it's essentially the serenity prayer. God, help me to accept the things that I can't change, to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference between the two. And so with that, the radical acceptance notion is identifying what you can manage and control, doing all that you can do to manage and control that. And then when you've reached your capacity, which requires some self-awareness, one of the things that Black people are infamous for is our resiliency. Our resiliency is it's second to none, and it's commendable. Many of us are responsible. Our success is explained by how responsibly resilient we are. But the trade-off in that is that we don't deal with pain very well, or we ignore the pain that we have as if we don't have it. So to suppress it, to put it down, this is why the life expectancy is cut down, 25% for African Americans to our white counterparts, is because culturally they're dealing with the therapy, they're going to therapy, they're dealing with the issues, and we're sucking it in. We're holding on to it. And so our bodies are imploding and it's breaking us down, starting with the awareness that it's happening. It's happening. I am stressed. I feel it. When I'm working with my clients, I do somatic exercises. I'm asking them, where do you feel the stress? Do you feel it in your neck? Do you feel it in your back? Do you feel it in your hands? Notice your body. Notice, what we call sensate focus, being sensate focused in what's happening in your body as you're experiencing the being fired from the job, or racial injustice or oppression, or police brutality, or being harassed, or whatever the case is. What are you feeling in your body? And then how am I coping with it? Not coping with it passively, but being active and direct and certain about targeting how to relocate that stress, to distribute that stress, to manage it, get it out, manufacture it into something that's positive for you. So when we refocus our stress, then it becomes something that works for us instead of working against us. But we have to repurpose it. It has to be intentional. The body's not going to do it itself normally. So that radical acceptance component is literally identifying the things that you can and can't change. Maybe writing it out on a piece of paper and saying, what can I influence change on? Okay, I can put in job applications. I can put a resume on Indeed. I can X, Y, and Z. What can I change? I can't make a boss say yes. I can't, barge in there and flip the tables over and demand racial equality. It's not going to bode well. Distinguishing those is very important, and then asking for peace to know the difference between the two and accept what you can't. That, I think, helps us in a practical way to how to manage that stress and to repurpose it.
I think I would add, I had a hard time with radical acceptance for a long time, because what I heard, and just for anyone else who's hearing it this way also, what I heard is that I'm supposed to say that this is okay. Mm-hmm. Radical acceptance means that this is okay, that discrimination exists, that this rape happened, that whatever. And that's not what it is. It just is that you're saying it happened. Mm-hmm. It happened, or it's happening. I'm not approving of it. It's not all right, but it is happening. And then I can turn over here, like Pastor Clark is saying, into things that I can control right now, and that I can push to a larger change. So it's not accepting, like, I'm in an abusive relationship, ho-hum, radical acceptance. That's not what it is. And it's not, this is okay that this happens. That's not what it is. It's just, this is happening, or this has happened. Okay, how can I direct my energy? And then, as Pastor Clark is saying, like, repurpose. And I say that not because you weren't clear, but years this took me, where I was rejecting radical acceptance because I was misunderstanding what it meant.
Thank you so much for mentioning that, Dr. Gomez. Huge point. A radical acceptance does not mean I am condoning or I like it. It doesn't mean that you like it. It doesn't mean, she's absolutely right. I'm happy she mentioned it because I forgot it. It does not mean that you are condoning it or you are fine with it. It just means that you've made an intelligent decision to no longer let that thing that you can't change rule your life. You take the driver's seat back by saying, okay, I can't change that. So if you're in a domestic violence situation, radical acceptance does not look like you staying in the house and continuing to get drugged through the house and being abused. Because you can change that. You can leave. You don't have to accept that. But it does mean that this person is abusive and you've accepted the fact that you can't change them. And so distinguishing that doesn't have to like it, but it definitely helps you just kind of release and begin to accept the things that you can't change and refocusing your energy on things that you actually can change, and still being able to say, I don't like this, and I need to process through what I don't like. I need to grieve. I need to talk about the frustration of it, getting it out. So yeah, that's it. Thank you, Doc.
I like that, that you can name it, you can own it, but it doesn't have to define you. Or like you said, Pastor Clark, it doesn't have to rule your life. You can acknowledge it for what it is, but you can say, I don't have to, like, I like to think of it as like that roller coaster, right? So you're on this roller coaster, whether it be abuse or violence or trauma and things of that nature. You're like, okay, I can choose to get off this roller coaster. This doesn't have to affect me as it has in the past. Like, I can be more in control of this, and this is what is in my control. I like that you mentioned that. And then Lisa and Michelle, you all talked about basically how the body keeps score and how we hold stress in our body. So I would like to take a minute to talk more about that relationship between our mental health and our physical health. So Lisa, since you like started, can you share a bit more about that from your experience and the work that you do?
Yeah. So every thought that we think, every emotion that we feel creates a chemical substance which manifests on a cellular level in the body. And what begins to happen when those thoughts and those feelings are chronically negative and we're in a negative thought loop pattern that we can't get out of, when it manifests in the physical body, it begins to compromise all systems in the body. So when the chronic stress appears, the cortisol hormone goes up. Our body believes we're in fight or flight mode. We need to get back to safety. Now our digestive system, our endocrine system, right, our vascular system is no longer priority. And so the volume is turned down on all those systems, right? The immune system, the volume is turned down on all those systems until those cortisol levels go down and our body and our brains can receive that signal that we're restored to safety. And that mechanism, that survival mechanism, is phenomenal for stray dogs and hot stoves, not so good for racism, right? And pandemics, right? Things that are a little more long-term. And so making sure we have the tools that all my colleagues on the panel are providing today at our disposal at any given moment to utilize to mitigate those physical reactions to the chronic stress that we're experiencing. Because when the volume is turned down on our immune system or in our endocrine system and all those systems, our body is then not creating antibodies to keep us healthy. We are not properly digesting our food, so we're not extracting nutrients from our food. So now we're particularly having nutritional deficiencies. We are more prone to toxicity. All of us have what's called free radicals, cancer cells in our body, right? And those things are more prone to thrive and metastasize if our immune system and all other systems in our body are not working properly. And so now chronic disease is a real threat. And it all stemmed from literally just emotional unrest. And so what we see, especially if individuals came into this stressful situation with pre-existing conditions, right, they're exacerbated. That's essentially what happens. And it's impossible to march, to hold a protest sign, to call your congressman or congresswoman. It's impossible to stand for something and really make headway in this pursuit of justice if you are not physically and mentally capable to do so, right? And so in order for us to really affect change in what's going on in our culture today, we got to show up to the march full on optimal health. It really, I'm drinking water and eating plants every day just so I can get justice for Breonna Taylor. You see what I'm saying? Like, it all comes together. There's no way to do this thing without being your best self, right? And so we have to make sure we're eating and drinking and thinking in such a way that's going to allow our bodies and our brains to be an asset and not a liability. Many of us are living every day in dysfunction, and our bodies have become a liability, meaning they're not adding value to our mission, right? They're actually hindering us from accomplishing that. And so when we're battling chronic disease and pre-existing conditions and prescription drugs, we got to deal with that first before we can show up and really tackle all those other things. And so it's important that we have the tools, the resources, and the individuals at our disposal that we can use to get whole, so that we can then help and seek out justice for the culture.
You can't pour from an empty cup, that's for sure.
That's it. Can't pour from an empty cup. That's right.
I mean, I don't even know if I have anything to build on that, because that was just perfect. That was absolutely beautiful. I think that the only thing that I can think of to align and build off of what Lisa just mentioned is accessibility. So when we're looking at what's accessible to folks, like, and I'm not saying it from like the standard clinical approach of like, what insurance do you have? Where's your market in your area or anything like that? I mean, like, what are you accessing on a daily basis? When is the last time you laughed? When is the last time that you called and like kicked it with your homegirl? Like, when is the last time you did things that are just so simple that you don't have to like go look for a resource guide to understand how to connect with these things? Go to YouTube and Google, or not Google, but go to YouTube and search Black people laughing. It's like a 5-minute video of just like different clips of, different Black people laughing. And it's joy. So how are you accessing the things that really penetrate that volatile environment? Like, we all show up differently in a way to protest. Like, sometimes going to sleep and taking a nap, just like Dr. Gomez mentioned, is protesting, it's resisting. And how are we using these simple things to access what's going to help us in just interrupting that pattern of carrying stress, carrying tension in the body? When is the last time you laughed? When is the last time you looked back on an old memory that really makes you chuckle? Something that's super accessible, that doesn't need to be broken down into different departments for you to understand what it is.
And then Pastor Clark, you raised your hand. Did you have something you wanted to add?
I was just going to let you know that your mic is a little low, and in the comment section here, people are requesting that you increase your volume, Danette, if you can.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd say for YouTube, if you want a good laugh, Sailor J is fantastic. She left YouTube a while ago, but her videos are still there. So Sailor J, and it's very incisive commentary on humanity and being a woman and a woman of color and so on and so forth, but die laughing. I'm going to go watch her after this, probably. I think, just one thing I would add, I'm not a physical expert here like some of the other panelists, is just how, when we're having a hard time, like, am I depressed? Am I anxious? How do I know if I need help? A lot of times it's easier for us to identify what's going on in our bodies, of like, my heart is racing, or I can't come down, or I feel like I want to like jump out of my skin. And so your physical body can be a route to kind of letting you know that something mentally is not going so great.
Definitely, our body definitely does tell us like, hey, something is not right here. We're not okay. And like we said before, like, we hold those different, that stress, we hold that pain and things in our body, and then our mental health can manifest itself in physical ways. And we may go to the doctor talking about this pain that we feel and things of that nature. And it's really something mentally that's going on, and vice versa too. Okay. I would like to talk about, because we started to talk about it a little bit, is the idea of we have to be strong, and that impact on our mental health. Because on one hand, it can be a positive, like we're strong, we're resilient and things of that nature. But there's also a downside to where we become, I don't want to say prideful, but we don't seek help. Like, although we are more likely and we admit to having more mental health concerns than other racial groups, we are also less likely to seek help for those things. Like, we'll go to the doctor at times if we can for physical health, but more so for our mental health. We don't really seek out those services. I would like to talk more so about that being strong and what that means and how we can use that on one hand to improve our mental health, but also to recognize like how that being strong and having to have all those answers and things of that nature and how that can affect us. Okay, and we can start with Dr. Gomez.
Come on, you surprised me. I think, I mean, when I think of with the strong, with being strong and it's gendered, in terms of men and women, binary gender, for both ways, like the strong Black woman and the invulnerable Black man, and everything. I think if we can expand what it means to be strong, like there are different approaches. One approach would be to throw it out and just say that we're not strong, or let's just, you know, throw everything out. I might be more of the mind to just expand what we mean by strong, and specifically what strong does not mean, which is like never sad, never unhappy, never need help, always caretaking for everyone else, not for ourselves. That, you know, kind of like letting go of those definitions perhaps, and instead having like being strong does mean like admitting when you need help, seeking help in different ways. So Dr. Monica Williams on Psychology Today, she has an article, she's a Black psychologist, Dr. Monica Williams, and let's title, "Is Your Therapist Qualified to Treat People of Color?" Heaven help us. Because the barriers to mental health, like I firmly believe that first and foremost, that's our profession's fault. Like it's clinical psychology's fault, it's social workers' fault, because of how therapy is and how we've all been trained. And so what Dr. Monica Williams talks about in this article, "Is Your Therapist Qualified to Treat People of Color?" is go into therapy and then ask questions. I mean, you can always go once and then try someone else. And so an analogy that is not mine, but I'll steal, is if you go and get your hair done, like my poor hair has not been braided in forever with the pandemic. If I go in once and she pulls my hair too tight and now I'm losing the hair at the roots because it's too tight, I'm not going back. But I am gonna get my hair braided someplace else. And I think we can think of therapy in that way of to not go in mindlessly, like we have a racism problem, yes, and mental health also, but not everyone. And there's a bunch of mental health professionals here who are testimonies to that, but go in and how can you ask the questions? And how can you say, if this one doesn't work, maybe a different one will, and I can still try, and I'm worth still trying. And while I'm trying with mental health and therapy, if I'm Christian, I'm also gonna try in church. If I'm Muslim, also in the mosque. If I'm not religious, also here, also there. I'm just gonna keep trying until I find things to work because I'm worth trying for.
100%. I'm gonna jump on the shoulders of what you shared, Dr. Gomez, and just really speak to the definition of strength. And I think for us to, if we're going to break through, you know, this concept of the strong Black woman, the strong Black man, you know, kind of just smiling, grinning, and bearing it, not dealing with the issues that are present. I think we have to simply look at the definition of strength. Strength is measured by one's ability to do things that they don't want to do, or do things that are not convenient, or to push against resistance. That's how strength is measured. So then if that is strength, if we believe that, then strength can't be holding in your emotions, because it's easy to do that. When you don't want to talk about something, it's easy to be quiet. You simply just don't, you just have to close your mouth when you don't want to talk about it. Strength is measured when you grab the bravery, when you can draw and harness the bravery to actually speak up about what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, and to be real about it. A strong Black man is not one who keeps his mouth shut and continues to take the beatings of society and act like he's Superman, like it's not affecting him. The strong Black man is not the man that can't communicate in a relationship and tell his woman, "You've hurt my feelings." That's not the strong Black man. That's easy to do because you just have to keep your mouth shut. You just have to just don't do what you don't want to do. Don't do what's convenient. Strength is measured when you push against the inconvenience. When you dare to do something about what is real, but it may not be comfortable. I'm thinking about a bench press. You know, it's if I'm going to get strong on a bench press, I've got to continue to push the weight and do that which is not convenient. I've got to push it, and then I've got to add weight to it. How do we become strong Black men and women? Well, we do things, number one, that aren't convenient for us, like speaking up about our feelings and our emotions and our traumas and things that have altered our lives. Think our disadvantages. We become self-advocates and advocates for others. These are all things that are not necessarily convenient. But how do we go to the next level in strength? Well, we do more of the same. We add more weight. We put more weight on that bar to continue to inconvenience ourselves. Continue to not only should we be having conversations in our relationships romantically, but we should be developing our conflict resolution skills and our interpersonal skills with our coworkers on our jobs and our friends, our platonic friends, and in business in general, in education, becoming advocates, becoming voices, rehearsing the muscle of advocacy, so that we are expelling the stress, expelling the frustrations, and thereby qualifying in the definition and concept of what strength truly is. It's the ability to push against something that's not convenient. And I think that is what will define a strong black man and Black woman.
I like that you mentioned that redefining what strength and being strong is, because we do think of it in ways of, oh, being able to handle and take on all these things, and we end up suffering in silence. But it's like, okay, no, there is strength and vulnerability. Sharing my story, saying I'm not okay, that I'm struggling, asking for help. That's also being strong. It doesn't have to be this one way where I just can do it myself. Sometimes I need help. Sometimes, like, I am going to struggle a little bit more in this area, and it's okay to share. It's okay to tell my friend that I'm not okay, or it's okay to say no when you don't have that capacity. That's also being strong, and like you said, advocating for yourself.
Absolutely. And just to adjust one review you mentioned there, if I could say it, I wouldn't say there's strength in vulnerability. I would say strength is vulnerability.
That's right.
It is when you are vulnerable, you're exhibiting strength, because to hold it in is more convenient. Not saying that it's easy to hold it in, but it is more convenient than actually getting it out. Have the difficult conversations. This is when I'm working with my trauma clients and even my sex addicts. The first thing I do is I appreciate their bravery for coming in. Celebrate the fact that you are doing what many to most people aren't doing, and that is coming in, talking to somebody, working on what's real for you. You're putting yourself in a vulnerable place, talking to a perfect stranger. Forget my credentials. You don't know me, and you're coming in here trying to get some help with it. That is strength, and that's what it looks like. It's personified when we do that. So I just want to emphasize that. If you want to be strong, deal with your issues, because that's where the real strength is.
Michelle?
Yeah, I'd like to build on what's been said in maybe a different way. Like I said before, I like to use really simple language so that people of all like understandings can get where we're going with this. The ability to have the word "and" in a sentence is so powerful. I think when we're like, first I like to actually like go back a little bit. When we're talking about where this like strong Black woman, strong Black man, or strong Black person comes from. It's born out of slavery, where people had to just deal. They didn't have choices. And as we kind of like, we can go through like different bodies of information of what that means, but that intergenerational trauma of just being the strong person in your family. I think that also is a way that we perpetuate our oppression in a way. So the ability to have that word "and" in a sentence. So yes, I live in a racist society, but I got to go to work. But I have to do this. If you're able to say, yes, I live in a racist society and I can choose to rest. I am mad about George Floyd and I can choose to laugh. I am sad about what is happening in my, relationship at home, and I can still choose. I can still make choices. There's power that we can return back to ourselves by just switching a but to an and. Like, you know how you say like you have to have a conversation with someone. I really like you, but blah, 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 blah. Changing the language from, I really like you, and this doesn't make me feel good. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about how we can both get what we want out of this situation, because it does not feel right to me. Or if we're talking about like in a professional setting, like with our colleagues, as one of the panelists mentioned, I really like working here. And I think that there are some practices occurring in my workspace that really need to be addressed, right? That power of being able to say, I am worthy of communicating my and. I am worthy of communicating that, yeah, you might see me as a strong Black so-and-so, and I can also communicate to you that something needs to change here so that it can benefit what feels good to me.
Super
I-
dope tip.
Go ahead.
That was just, I just want to say that was a super dope tip. Very, very small change in language makes a huge difference in perspective and how it's received on the other end.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Definitely that. And like, we don't have to pick and choose, like you can be both, and it can be a spectrum of different feelings and different experiences and different levels of Blackness and the way we do our Blackness and things of that nature. I love that you mentioned that. Can everyone hear me? I know some people have mentioned that I'm pretty low. Can you all hear me? Okay, good. All right. So it's almost 2:30, so I want to start to transition us a little bit into some questions that people ask. But before we get to their questions, I would like to just pose a question of, we've talked about some barriers, we've talked about some mental health concerns and things of that nature. So there's a question of what now? So we have to be woke, right? What's going on in the world. We can't really escape it. It's on social media, it's in the news, it's in our friend groups, it's at work, it's showing up in various capacities. And I know a lot of my friends, a lot of like colleagues and things of that nature have shared, like, what do we do now? Like, there's so much going on. It's overwhelming. I don't know what to do. Like, my mental health is not okay and things of that nature. So what can I do to do my part, still be woke, you know, but also take care of myself, and also like advocate for my people and talk about mental health and things of that nature. So what can we do? What are some coping skills? Some practices to help each other and things of that nature. Excuse me.
I'll start with the physical health piece really quickly. As far as taking care of yourself and improving your ability to navigate your emotions, improving your EQ, you want to be drinking at least half of your healthy body weight in ounces of water per day, every single day. You want to eliminate refined sugar from your diet, all of it. There's no room for any refined sugar in your diet, along with all colorants and food dyes and MSG. These are excitotoxins, which causes hyperactivity in the brain and really limits our ability to concentrate, focus, problem solve, and recall. So from a dietary standpoint, to get on a path to a healthy mental state, it's going to be water, the elimination of refined sugars, and then you want to eliminate the body of mucus as much as possible. And that's going to come in the form of eliminating dairy, processed foods, and as much meat and animal products as possible. When you're eating whole, real, unmanipulated foods, as close to how they come out of the ground as possible, you really give your body and your brain a chance and an opportunity to think clearly, to be able to go into a restful and a good sleeping state, where essentially all the magic happens for you to perform every day, and you really give yourself the best fighting chance to combat any anxiety, psychotic breaks, depressive states that you're going into. So from a nutritional standpoint, you really want to clean up your plate, lean towards a more whole food, plant-based diet, eat the rainbow, eat as many colors as possible, right? Diversity is key in these plants so that you don't have to take vitamins and medications and supplements, but getting everything you need from the earth.
Yeah. Starting within, not only from a physical health perspective, but also going to that faith as well, and internally that spiritual side. And then, like you said, making sure you put in good stuff, you know, slinging them plants, like you said. And then would anyone else like to add to what Lisa said?
Yeah,
far
I can't. I'm sorry, Danetta.
Yeah,
I'll deviate. I'm taking notes. I do drink the water, but I'm slow stepping into a healthier lifestyle. So I'm coming, Lisa. I think touching quickly on all your points, I think in terms of what to do with advocacy, doing the stuff that works for you. And so for me, I can write. And so I write op-ed pieces and I give interviews to where then the author writes it up. Like those are things that I'm good at and can do, whereas some other things would be much harder for me to do. And so there isn't one way to be like fighting the good fight or advocating. There's all these different ways to do it, and you can do it in a way that works. I think in terms of Detroit being connected, the Metro Detroit Association of Black Psychologists, of which I'm a member, is fantastic. It's ABPSI, so ABPSI Detroit.com. Get hooked in with them, see what they're doing, see what they're offering, is a nice way to be involved. In terms of like your suffering and what can you do right now, I have talked about it, and many psychologists do, about grounding techniques. So there's an article that just came out in Shape magazine. It's how to tap into your 5 senses to find peace and be present. So from Shape, how to tap into your 5 senses to find peace and be present. This is by Mallory Krevling. I was interviewed for it, and what happened is I was explaining the 5 senses to her on the phone, and I got a call or a text from someone that was very stressful. And so I'm texting him back like, I'm on with Shape, give me a second. But I'm there all in a tizzy now. And so as I'm talking to Mallory Krevling, I'm going through the grounding 5 senses, which is, so your senses are sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. So what you do to not be the police are killing everyone all the time place and be in a what am I doing right now place is you can say, okay, what I'm seeing right now is I have white walls. I have white blinders here. It's the thing that I pulled down is moving back and forth a little bit. What am I hearing? My air conditioner just turned on, so I'm hearing the air. I'm hearing the sound of my own voice. If I touch my wrist, I'm seeing that it's smooth. Where is my tension? My shoulders are here. What happens if I release them down? Let me put my feet flat on the ground. Oh, the ground is a little bit cold. And so you're using your senses, your sight, your sound, and so on to get yourself into the present moment. And then with part of this being, you can focus on your breath and like you breathe in like all the toxins and everything terrible in the world. And then you, as you're breathing out, are just like making your body smooth and calm and released. And that article gives you a step-by-step of how to do that. But that one is a really easy, like, how do I not, I'm finally at home, I'm finally by myself, I can take a break, but the world has not left me and I just feel totally trapped. It's a way to get yourself separated from that. Grounding techniques.
I love grounding techniques because it puts you in tune with your body and where you're feeling different things and that stress as well. So I thank you for sharing that.
I feel like we are in a place where we're all getting a crash course in distress tolerance, which is, as Pastor Clark knows, it's a part of DBC. And distress tolerance really means that what I'm experiencing is causing me to not feel okay. And what can I do about it that's not going to make it worse? So it's something to grasp on it. And one of those things is definitely what Dr. Gomez is talking about, those grounding techniques, mindful meditation, even the very simple 4-7-8 breathing technique, inhaling for 4 seconds, holding your breath for 7 seconds, and exhaling for 8 seconds. That's going to bring your heart rate down and bring you back to a more calm state. In getting in touch, like self-soothing, doing things that will make you feel good to yourself, whether it's even just a warm bubble bath, something that is self-soothing. It doesn't have to be very, very complicated. So it can be small steps. If you're feeling like the walls are closing in on you, taking a nice walk or a bike ride to help just get some fresh air, things that will help us to, in the moment, feel better. It doesn't change the situation, right? It's going back to the radical acceptance that Pastor Clark was talking about. It doesn't change what's happening, but it helps us feel better in the situation, doesn't make things worse. We're not saying what's happening is okay, but it just helps bring us back to where we're able to function in our normal baseline and not be so escalated if we're feeling distressed.
One thing I'll just add really quickly is that from what Alicia's saying, that for people who have been sexually abused, perhaps particularly overnight, like being calm can be very scary and actually be kind of triggering. And so being able to have, as you're doing these common things, if you're finding that it's making it a little bit worse, practicing like, I am safe now. It is okay for me to be calm. This is a different situation than before, and I can relax. And even just having self-talk like that as you're doing the breathing, so that, again, you're grounded to the present, because your body's trying to protect you. When I was calm, something bad happened. So your body's trying to protect you, but it's a false alarm now, because now you're safe. And so being able to have that self-talk can help, that even if you've been sexually abused in these ways, you also do get to be calm, and you can help your body relearn being calm.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, ladies. Two things coming to mind for me. One is social, and the other is physical. When you are experiencing stress, I think it's important to number one, talk about it. Talk about it, and find somebody in your support system that you feel comfortable talking to. And if you fear that they may advise you or try to correct you, then you might want to preface your disclosure with, hey, here's what I need. I need someone to listen to me, and I'm not looking for any feedback right now. I just need a sounding board. I need somebody to understand and support me, someone to validate what I am feeling and what I'm going through. So finding somebody to talk about it, confessing it, just publishing what's inside, holding it in, I think is the worst thing that you can do. Jesus Christ, who is God himself in the flesh, is no exemption to this. Before he was getting ready to go to Calvary's cross and die, he said in the Garden of Gethsemane, he said, Lord, if it be your will, let this cup pass away from me. I don't want to do this. This is stressful. And the scripture says that he sweat blood droplets. He was so anxious. There's anxiety right there in the scripture, in God himself in the flesh. He's anxious. He says, if it be your will, let this pass away from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours. I'm going to do it, but I need to talk about it. I need to say that this is frustrating. That I need to, even though I'm deity, even though I'm spiritual, even though I pray and all of that, I am human. I have feelings. And here's what I'm feeling. Publishing it out of your mouth, talking about it. There's an example. I can't think of a better example off the top of my head than that just there. Secondly, physical. There is an exercise that I use with a lot of my clients called progressive muscle relaxation. Progressive muscle relaxation. Very simple exercise for you to do. Very easy. You can do it in your car. You can do it at home. And that is essentially just starting at your feet, clenching the muscles of your feet, holding them for about 5 to 7 seconds if you can, as tight as you can, without straining yourself or hurting yourself, stressing the muscles and then releasing them. And then breathing, going back to the breathing techniques that Alicia was talking about. Breathing, inhaling 4 seconds, holding for 4 to 5 seconds, exhaling slower 6 seconds, controlling your breathing. And then after you do one phase of your body, you start at your feet, you do your calves, you do your thighs, you do your torso, your abdomen area, your pecs and your arms, your triceps and biceps, clench them all, even all the way up to your neck and your face. Clench everything progressively. Then at the final round, simultaneously, everything at the same time, and try to sustain it and then just release. And just notice the feeling of release, of relief in your body as you progressively engage and discharge your muscles on a consistent basis. Between each progression, you want to make certain that you're breathing, that you're integrating the breathing pattern between each of those progressions, and watch your anxiety, watch your stress, watch your emotions begin to decline. It works. Is it a remedy? Is it a cure to your malady? No, it's not. But it is a coping skill. It helps you manage, and it's a healthy one. Opposite of going to drugs, alcohol, hooking up with somebody that you got no business being with, that you're going to regret later, all that stuff. You can avoid it by doing something like that. And then, by the way, another component to it is, this is something that you can choose to do or not, and that is um, picking one of your favorite nature sounds, going to YouTube and identifying some ocean sounds, or maybe city traffic at night is peaceful for you, or grass being mowed or something like that, and playing that in the background while you're going through this, taking yourself mentally to your happy place, imagining going to Tahiti or Hawaii or Jamaica or wherever, and doing this while you're on a mental vacation. Just getting away from it, I think, is really a practical way to manage what you're feeling, and it'll help.
I love all of the resources that you all shared, from the five senses technique, the grounding that you talked about, Dr. Gomez, and the deep breathing and the controlled breathing that you mentioned, Alicia and Michelle talking about yoga, and Pastor, you talking about progressive muscle relaxation. It's one of my favorite things. And it's really simple. All of the techniques that you provided are really simple to do, and things that they can do in just a few minutes. And then Lisa, you talked about watching what you consume and what you put in your body, and the importance of that. And I see you raising your hand, Michelle.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in a couple of things. So as a yoga instructor, my main thing when I talk to my clients is moving your body, and moving it in a way that it's synchronized with your breath. So when you inhale, raise your hands, look all the way up past your fingertips, like actually starting to feel the synchrony of inhaling and exhaling while moving the body. And we talk about being woke and rested at the same time. I think Dr. Gomez and Alicia both mentioned like understanding what you are able to do. So setting your daily capacity. So when you wake up, maybe you feel like you're on like a scale of Angela Davis and you're ready to go out and actually like have real dialogue. Maybe you're at a point right now where you're more of an introvert. So setting those daily capacities every day to understand where you are at. My cousin is a social worker as well, and we were just having a conversation about how available coping skills are on Pinterest. So maybe you pair those up with your therapist and say, hey, I went on Pinterest and I looked up some of these coping skills for anxiety. What do you think about these? And also, I think, Dr. Gomez, you mentioned something about trauma. So as a yoga instructor, when I work with people who have experienced trauma, sometimes closing the eyes is overly traumatic. It brings the body back to that place, like how you mentioned. And this might be something difficult to say at the moment, but I feel like it's necessary to say, when you have trauma and you're in this healing phase or this healing journey, noting where you are in that healing journey is critical. Because if you're at a point where you need to go back and really process it and open it up and peel back the layers, then maybe a trauma-informed yoga person would be more beneficial for you. But when you're trying to heal and you're in the middle of that healing phase, it's okay to collect new experiences. Just like how she mentioned, when you close the eyes, if that brings back a point in time where your body is physically triggered, it is okay for you to analyze where you're at in your environment, identify that you're safe, and collect a new experience. So, and it's not just with trauma, it's with racism, it's with everything that we're talking about on this panel discussion, is that it's okay to collect new experiences where you're not the person on the end of the stick receiving the short end. It's okay for you to be in the exact same scenario that you were there before, when you got hurt really, really bad by somebody's words, actions, structure, systemic oppression, whatever it was. And in that moment, collect a new experience on the other side of it, for you to experience joy, for you to experience happiness, for you to experience a point where you can just be. You don't even have to have an adjective to describe whatever you are in this woken, rested state. You just get to choose to collect another experience on it. So that's just all I wanted to add.
Thank you for that. Very important to meet yourself where you are. You know, we talk about meeting other people, but we have to meet ourselves to where we are. Like sometimes we don't have the capacity to be Angela Davis, but maybe we share justice for Breonna Taylor on our social media pages, or we say no to engaging in certain conversations, or we just take a minute, like Dr. Gomez said earlier, to take a nap or watch some TV or just do anything that we identify as something that helps us access that happy place, that calm place, or anything that just makes us feel joy, you know. So, yeah. All right, so we'll take a few questions before we wrap up here. One question that was posed is, how can we get the faith-based community talking more about mental health aside from advising believers to just pray about it? So I'll start with you, Pastor Clark, and then we can open it up to anyone else who wants to chime in. That's kind of your area.
Sure. How can we get the faith-based community to what again?
To talk more about mental health as opposed to saying just pray about it.
Yeah, I think it starts with continuing the petition of the presence of mental health in the church. A huge component to why I did what I did was because, in terms of going to school to get a clinical degree, is because it was a void in the church. It just was unprecedented by and large. It was a huge void, and so I'm dedicating my work and my life to being that liaison to the mental health field and the church, and that trying to help destigmatize some of the taboos that are around mental health. And so it starts with bringing people in, inviting people like myself. And this is not a petition for an invitation, but people who are mental health professionals who have a faith background, inviting them in to come into the church and to talk about those issues, to do presentations, to do Bible studies around identifying mental health in the Bible. There is suicide ideation, there is anxiety, there is depression, there is a borderline personality disorder, there's histrionic disorder in the Bible, there is dissociative identity personality disorders in the Bible. It all manifests itself as mental illness, but the root of it is spiritual. Spirits need hosts. Spirits need bodies to manifest themselves, and they do so neurologically. And so science and psychology studies the neuroscience of it all, but they don't see the root of it. And the root of it is the spiritual influence. So this is not something so this is why they don't compete. This is why science and faith and Christianity do not compete. Science helps explain what is precedented in the spirit realm. It helps us articulate it. It helps us to see it. It helps us to understand it. So really kind of challenging ourselves to look at scripture clinically and scientifically. It's all there. You just, bringing people in to have these discussions who may have language and perspective and education that you don't have in your church, to speak truth to power to leaders, to have meetings, to come in and to challenge some of the belief systems in the church. I think it starts with conversations being had. And the more that we talk about it, then the more comfortable that we can become with it, the more we can desensitize the anxiety around this type of advocacy and presence in the church. And I think that's a good start. But yeah, I mean, if you got to get more practical, you've got people who are passionate about this stuff. Talk to your pastors, petition them, write emails, sign a petition, get the church, people in the church, in your congregations, or in your mosques or in your fellowships or what have you, whatever your faith orientation is, get these people to come together, to caucus together, and to put forth proposals about real needs. And any good leader will at least listen to that, if not game plan on how to actually get active and meet those needs. So I think it starts with conversations and self-advocacy.
Mm-hmm. What I heard you saying is making sure we not only have those conversations, but normalizing mental health and talking about how it's connected to our faith. The examples in the Bible, it's not like a separate entity Like it's all there.
100%, 100%. It's all precedented. I mean, just replay this video and listen to some of the stuff I said. These personality disorders, these mental illnesses, these mood disorders, they're all in scripture. Because why are they? Because people have been people since the beginning of time. We've always been people, and the Bible is a narrative about people. So it's all there. So yeah, I think that's important.
Thank you for that. Would anyone else like to add or build upon what Pastor Clark said? Right. Sorry, go ahead, Michelle.
No, I was just going to say there's a group, I can't think of the name right now, but her tagline is, I talk to Jesus and my therapist. So,
Absolutely.
Yep.
That goes to your point of like you can be both. It doesn't have to be one or the other. You can talk to Jesus and you can see a therapist.
They do not compete. Jesus is not threatened by your therapist. Jesus gave your therapist skills to help you. It's okay.
Okay, another question that was posed is, can you all speak about the imposter syndrome within the Black professional community? How do we combat it?
The best thing I heard about this, and again, this is not mine, is that the imposter syndrome is racism, sexism, and so on, like living inside of you. And so the system is telling you, I work at a predominantly university, predominantly white field, is telling me I'm not good enough and shouldn't be here. And so liberation piece for me is just not buying into that and just saying like, that's oppression talking right now. And I'm not going to believe that. And that once you understand that racism, for instance, is part of the systems and not like an individual who's being mean, but like this is like how the system was set up and designed, then you could start to predict it everywhere. So then when someone talks down to you, you're like, oh, that's very predictable. That was sexist and racist. And you just start to externalize it all once you see it. And once you're very deliberate of like, I'm just not doing that right now. Like I'm not engaging with that right now. And so for me, I don't have imposter syndrome. And I always tell people I don't, because the messaging that you'll get in academia is that you will always have it. You will never feel good enough. You'll always feel bad about yourself. And I don't believe that. And I think that from a black and like a Black power perspective is like, I'm not buying into the racism or in my case, sexism or homophobia or gender nonconformity or whatever it is. Like, I'm not doing that today. And I'm going to be not a jerk, not an arrogant jerk, but like confident in what I can do and be taking in feedback from people who aren't racist and sexist. So I take in feedback from very few people. Most people who want to give me feedback, I don't always take in. You know, I have people that I go to when I want feedback for, because people have problems with bigotry and are part of these systems.
Yeah, so you're speaking to like, yes, this is happening, but I don't have to take that on personally. Okay. Anyone else?
Yep, I will. I will say there's power in naming it. And it's okay if you name it after it's been going on for so long. So a personal example, like not under like any of my professional identities, I graduated CAS. Went off to the University of Michigan my first year. And I mean, just for like a simple way and more relatable way, I was a girl from the hood at a really prestigious university that was just like a huge culture shock to me. And there are a lot of the things that in the ways of my life that I could not really understand how to integrate into a white space, like such a prestigiously, like not want to say bougie, but kind of bougie white space. And I didn't realize until after I had assimilated into the culture that there was a reason why my assimilation happened, because it was deemed from their point of it, where whatever my language I would use, whatever I would wear, like however kind of like listening to loud music or whatever it was deemed as wrong in that environment. So I didn't realize it until actually going back for my master's degree that I assimilate it. And even noticing it after the fact, having to go back and acknowledge like, whoa, like the language that I used to use, like I had to like transform and assimilate to use like really expensive language. So I had to name it after the fact of realizing how much of my life I had changed just so I can be accepted by like institutional whiteness, so to speak. And when you finally are in that position where you can name it, like, whoa, I had to code switch in order to be accepted. Like, that's deep. Whoa, was I never not like, was I not good enough to be in that space in the first place? Like, I'm just a girl from Schoolcraft in Detroit over here at the University of Michigan trying to be something, but everything in this environment is rubbing up against what I feel like I know and what I feel like who I am. And it took a lot of like really going back to remember specific moments where I said something and I felt embarrassed because I said it, but I was speaking from a really true place. It just wasn't accepted in that environment. And then I buckled down and changed. It took it, I know I'm kind of like all over the place, but it took it for me to be at a position in my life to look back on when imposter syndrome set in and I actually conformed. So now, after being in a place where I've named it, I've not, so to speak, healed from it, I know how to just straight up say to people, I'm not going to use expensive language right now for you to understand what I'm saying to you. And that has been transformational for me because it makes room for the person on the other end to be like, okay, they can call me aggressive, they can call me whatever they want to call me, but I still need to say, I'm not going to use expensive language right now for us to have this very simple conversation that can be used in inexpensive language or just basic everyday common term language for something to be accomplished.
That's beautiful, Michelle. I wanted to even just piggyback on even my personal experience. I am the only Black therapist in the group practice that I am in. My office is in Utica, and there's over 30 therapists in the practice. And I found myself wanting to position myself to be the perfect Black therapist so that I could represent my profession and people who look like me and to communicate my good enoughness to my colleagues. And this whole pandemic has really helped me to realize that that's not a burden that I have to carry, and nor is it something that I have to put myself in and put a pressure on myself to just be myself and not and be 100% unapologetically Black, and that's okay. So a part of my process was buying this shirt and wearing it, right, as to say I'm a Black therapist, and that is okay. And I can show up in spaces, white spaces, spaces of color, and be okay with that, and not have to be a perfect, which we all know isn't even attainable, but a perfect version of myself in order to receive that acceptance.
Mhm. Yeah. The concept of I am enough. This is me. Yeah. And then we'll take about 2 more questions if that's okay, and then wrap up. And I would like to ask this to you, Alicia, because it's about students, and I know you had worked with that population. This person asks, what advice would you give to educators when supporting students, specifically younger, like in the ages, if you can speak to this, kindergarten through 3rd grade? Like, what are like tangible strategies to give to parents, to give to teachers, educators, and things of that nature? How they can best support children and also be adaptable to children, I think is what she's saying.
Yeah. The hard part was working with that population, the little people, so I like to call them, because we sometimes will use kids to dehumanize them, and they are like little people. They have feelings. They are taking in all of this. Their world has completely changed and altered, and sitting down and getting with them on their level. And so, it's going to be difficult, especially for teachers to connect with them, just because of the limitations that they have with Zoom and all of that. And even if you now going into a possible new school year, not even having like a relationship with the kiddos that are going to be coming into their classrooms, but somehow getting on their level. So even for parents, being able to even just sit down on the floor and use those common words that Michelle was talking about to really identify how they're feeling, and sitting like in increasing their feeling vocabulary. A lot of times you'll hear kids, you say, how are you doing? They'll say good, okay. And those aren't really feeling words. And so helping to increase their feeling vocabulary, and then tap into and teaching them ways to do some of the things that we were even talking about. Children are absolutely able to do meditation. They're absolutely able to do the progressive muscle relaxation that Pastor Clark was talking about, and the 5 senses that Dr. Gomez, all those things are very tangible for children to do. We just have to take the time to sit down and get on their level and use and teach them ways to communicate about their feelings, and take that necessary time and on their timing. Right? Because kids are one of the most honest people. That's why I love working with them. They will not hold you up. They do not care about your level of stature, your education. If they don't feel like talking to you, they're going to tell you. So, in their time, making sure that you allow them to come to them in their time and give them a space to listen to what they're feeling.
Yeah, definitely meeting them where they are, and also recognizing that they're trying to navigate the world just like we are. They're trying to understand the world, understand what's going on. They're taking in all of that that is happening in the world, and they're also picking up on what we're experiencing as well. They feel and sense those things. So like understanding like they're kids, but they have feelings. Their feelings are valid, and we have to get on their level and teach them different coping skills. We have to listen to them and not dismiss them because they're kids and they're resilient. I hear a lot of people say, oh, kids are resilient. They went through this. They'll get over it. They'll grow up. No, like you were a kid once too, and you're still healing from some of that stuff. So imagine what they're feeling.
Exactly.
I'd like to share, just as a mama and a yogi, specifically from the mindfulness standpoint for kids, make a game. Like kids love games. So like I have a pen right here. If my 3-year-old were to bust in this space right now and I want him to be mindful or meditate, he knows that when I grab this pen, I put it to my nose to breathe in, and like sometimes being animated with it, like breathe in, breathe out, and like making a visual game out of certain things. And then like even with the coffee cup, like if you have like hot cocoa or a hot drink or hot water, just have them say, gotta cool it down. Like make it a visual representation for them to see, like, oh, okay, we have to take a moment for this to happen. And there's a TED talk, I can't remember her name, but it's a bite-sized mindfulness for children. And it focuses on like the approach that, like you said, children are little people too. Like they have a whole bunch of feelings, but they don't really have all of the skills that we have to deal with those feelings. Like we can probably like name like, oh, I'm really stressed. A 5-year-old may not really understand the concept of stress. They just know that their world is like visually bouncing all over for them and they don't know what to do with it. So tangible things to do with them is make a game, make it fun, change the inflection of your voice for them to like get your attention and see, for you to get their attention and see like, oh, it's okay for me to like laugh right now or be happy right now. And I know that that's really simple, but it works for kids. When you make something fun and you get them to buy into like the excitement of stuff, not only will it just teach them to do the activity in the moment, but when they come up with other things and as they grow older, they'll start to see like, oh, maybe I should take a moment to just put a pen against my nose and breathe. Or maybe they'll go off to college one day and every time they touch their pen with the nose, they'll remember just to breathe, because it's something that you started at a very early time in their life to get them to understand the concept of taking a deep breath in, taking a deep breath out. They may not understand like how it integrates into the body and like relaxes all the muscles and relaxes like the emotional portion of it, but they'll get it that, okay, deep breath in, deep breath out.
It goes back to your point of watching our language, right? Play oftentimes is a child's language, so we can use games and different play activities to teach them those skills of like identifying emotions or like feeling how do we hold stress and things in our body. There's tons of resources and Pinterest activities and things like that out there to help them process those things and help people as parents and educators as well to help them like navigate the world and also understand emotions and mental health. All right. And then last question, and I'll ask this to Pastor Clark again because it speaks to men. So I would like you to speak on it, and then as well, anyone else can chime in. How do we create a space for our Black men to express all of their emotions other than anger, which has been their only normalized feeling in this world?
How do we create the space for it? Is that what I heard?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Lots of different things are coming to mind. I think with Black men, um, we are we are socialized to be covert with what we feel and what we think, and we are also socialized to compete and to conquer. With that, I think if you are going to begin to help Black men speak about things that are serious, that are internal, I think it's important to incentivize the Black man. Um, you putting together social events like, maybe there's a hybrid of sports and discussion where we know we like to compete. There's a game on, so after we, before we watch the game, we have a discussion, and then afterwards, then we watch sports and we socialize. Or you could invert that order: sports and talk, or however you want to to frame it. um because that those emotional skills and those emotional intelligence um skills are not, and generally they're not developed. So we have to, you're not going to take a 2-year old and put them on a bicycle and expect them to ride and fly, right? So what do? Well, you work with them and you kind of let them get of age a little bit before, maybe even before you put them on training wheels. I mean, you put them on training wheels first, and then you hold their hand and you let them see how it feels to get on a bike. And then gradually, after they, are rehearsed in it long enough, then they come around. So I think it starts with, you know, giving the child candy, incentivizing the child to try something new. Black men are not children, of course, we're men, but the concept is the same in principle. And that is, how can we incentivize what is interesting? Doing a case study on what Black men find interesting. We know Black men find sports interesting. We know Black men find women interesting. Some of the closest friends I have right now, they didn't get saved in the church because they loved God. They got saved because all the women were there, and they wanted to be in the company of them. So, yeah, it's not a good ulterior motive to go to church for women, but if God can use that to work through people and save people, then it becomes something that's positive. So, thinking of creative ways on how to incentivize men for engagement to be able to discuss. Maybe you do, a social where it's a business planning venture where you're doing, you're brainstorming business plans or entrepreneurial advancement and concepts like that, and then have a social component where you identify a subject matter, so, business and anxiety, business and stress, business and romance, and kind of facilitating these hybrid style events to where you can incentivize Black men to dip their toe in the water and get comfortable with talking about their feelings, because very few of us, if any at all, take that faithful plunge and just jump in. It just doesn't happen. It's just not the way we're socialized. So I think creating the hybrids is going to be really important.
Mhm.
Oh,
Going back.
also very, very important before we go. Um, Sometimes Black men, they want to talk, but they don't feel it's safe to talk. And so what I have found out that is very successful for my clients, my couples, and even when I am attempting to connect with a client of mine directly, is self-disclosure. Self-disclosure is so powerful, because people, when sometimes people want to talk, but they're afraid to talk. So if they see you speak to the subject first, then they are suddenly inspired to unravel, to open up, to partner with what's already been precedented. So, for instance, I grew up in foster care. I was, Northwest Side, born and raised in the hood, of Detroit, but bounced around in foster care. And I was, I have clients who have also been in foster care. And so when it comes to them talking about that, I'm sensing the trepidation, I'm sensing the anxiety. And then I'll say something like, hey, I want to share something with you. Here is, can I talk about my experience? I was born and raised in their city, but I was in foster care. My mom was on drugs. My dad, you start self-disclosing something. I'm not saying talk about your entire life, but do disclose something where, if it means to connecting, and this is maybe in a relationship context, maybe he's afraid to talk about his emotions because maybe you haven't talked about yours. Talk about yours first and ask him how he can relate to that. Is there anything coming up for him? Facilitating that gradual drawing out, getting them comfortable by leading by example. Self-disclosure is very, very powerful.
I think I know we're over time, if I could add just really quickly to Pastor Clark's first point, that there are Black men who are different and who are being emotional and engaging in this way, and who are punished for it. And gay men, or if you're gay, or if you're presumed to be gay, or gender nonconforming, or if you're even more feminine. And so us, the collective us, just being reinforcing of that behavior. And so when men who are already engaging in these types of ways are then reinforced as opposed to punished for doing this. And I think maybe for women, or for non-Black men, Donald Glover mentioned in a stand-up that he had years ago of Black women seem to want, he fights a lot and he fixes babies, and it doesn't exist. All of this magical person that's very aggressive, even violent at times, but also very sensitive. And, so us being clear of who do we actually want? And if we're saying that the men that we want to be engaging with are people who are sensitive and emotional, then engaging with those men and engaging in those ways with men, as opposed to putting up these impossible standards of hypermasculinity and then really sensitivity and then this and this and this and that, of us being clearer and just reinforcing and protecting, I think, Black men who are emotion filled, and not punishing that because of our rigid male gender standards.
Michelle, did you raise your hand?
I do have something to say, but I was basically yeah, she's on point with what she's saying. So back to that language piece, right? So I think all of us as clinical therapists on this call can understand the power of tell me more. When a man discloses something or talks about something for some simple language, tell me more. What do you mean by that? I know I'm speaking right now as just a wife. When my husband goes through certain things, I try to create a space where I tell him hey, I see you. I'm observing you. What's going on with you? Are you okay? And then if there's a space where I know that based on our relationship, I've been with him for a while, so I can see that this is maybe a pattern that he talks about from his childhood, I'll always say hey, do you have the space in our marriage to not always be so happy? Because his style or his way is always making a joke out of something, bringing the laughter to the room and the space. And I'll always be do you ever have space in our marriage to be sad, to be upset, or just to keep it to yourself so you don't have to feel pressured to always share it? It's okay for you to have that. I think that there's always a power in giving that man that option to say hey, I know you like being the macho man, but you want to be emotional today, or do you need some space for me to really hear you out? Because you seem like you're carrying a lot on you right now, and I just want you to know that as your friend, as your wife, sister, whatever role you play to that man, it's okay for you to share that with me, and I'm not going to judge you. I actually have space and capacity to receive you and not react in the wrong way after you share it with me.
So I heard a lot of you all saying normalize it, have the conversations, share your testimony or your story, and then also like helping them understand you don't have to be this one way. You don't have to be masculine. You don't have to be strong. You can be you. You can be vulnerable. You can share how you're feeling. I want to hear you. I have the space to hear you. Okay. And then we're going to end there as far as questions. Sorry, we couldn't get to everyone, but I would like to end with you all just sharing how people can get in contact with you if they're interested. For example, in Dr. Gomez, if they're interested in your research and what you're doing, how can they connect with you, and so on and so forth. So we'll start with Dr. Gomez and work our way through everyone.
Sure. So I'm Jennifer M. Gomez, and my website is jmgomez.org. And so Jennifer M. Gomez, website jmgomez.org. I keep articles up there, everything, my email, my Twitter account, information is overflowing there. So jmgomez.org.
Thank you. All right, Alicia, go ahead. Can you share how people can connect with you if they want to seek out your services? You also make some awesome cakes and things of that nature. So feel free to share that.
Yes, I call myself the baking therapist. That's my therapy, baking. And I know Lisa gonna get on me for that, but that's the way I try not to eat too many of those. But how people can get in contact with me, of course, I'm on Psychology Today. I have my business page, Alicia Jackson LPC, on Facebook as well. And Wentworth and Associates is the name of the agency that I belong to. And my information can be found on their website, which is wentworthandassociates.com. So feel free to reach out there.
Awesome. Thank you. Michelle?
So you can contact me at thehumanitycollection@gmail.com. Also on my social media handles, M Christie is my Instagram, MCHRISTII, and Michelle Madison on Facebook. Madison, MATTISON.
Thank you. And then Pastor Clark?
Yes, if you're interested in hearing me speak or visiting the church, it's conquerorschurch.org. The handle is on Twitter at Conquerors Church, as well as YouTube as well. So the services are cast there and on those platforms. And then clinically, my website is Clifford. I'm sorry, that's not my website. I'm giving you my Facebook and Instagram. My website is Transparent Professional Counseling. So it's transparent-counseling.com. Transparent-counseling.com is the website. The business name is Transparent Professional Counseling. I'm in private practice. I have 2 offices, one in Southgate, one in Inkster. The social media handles, therefore, the practice is Transparent Pro Counseling, Transparent Pro Counseling. And then my personal handles on social media is Clifford J. Clark.
Awesome. Thank you. And lastly, Lisa, can you share how people can access your services?
Yes. Yes, it's been a pleasure sharing this space with you all today. I'm Lisa A. Smith on Facebook and Instagram. My website is lisaangelsmith.com, lisaangelsmith.com. And from there, you can tap into my podcast, book me for a speaker, join one of my courses, buy my book, and whatever else needs to be done. Email, download my media kit, lisaangelsmith.com, and Lisa Angel Smith on IG and FB. Thanks, Danette.
Thank you. I want to say before we end, thank you to each and every one of you. I could not have done this without you, of course, and I appreciate you for taking the time out of your Saturdays to share with everyone about mental health and wellness, share your expertise and your advice. I really, really, really appreciate it, and I can't stress that enough, that I'm so grateful for each and every one of you all, and I'm so excited for the work that you're doing, and I hope that I can connect in various capacities with you all and do more work in the mental health and wellness field with you all. And then lastly, thanks to everyone that's tuning in. If you would like to connect with any of our panelists, I will make sure that we send out their information as well. All right, well, enjoy the rest of you all Saturday and be blessed.
Thank you so much, Danetta. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was great being with you guys today.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.